In 1315, the powerful House of Habsburg marched into the mountains believing the campaign would end quickly. Their army looked unstoppable. Armored knights, war horses, steel banners, moving through narrow alpine roads. To them, this was not a war, it was a punishment, a simple show of power against small mountain communities that dared resist their authority. But high above the roads, hidden among forests, rocks, and steep ridges, the people of the mountains were waiting. Not nobles, not professional soldiers, farmers, hunters, militia fighters, men who understood the land better than any invading army ever could, and they had already chosen where the battle would happen. Then the signal came. A single shout echoed through the mountains, and suddenly the mountain itself attacked. Massive rocks thundered down the slope. Heavy logs crashed into the marching column, horses screamed and reared in panic. Knights were thrown from their saddles, steel armor became dead weight against the frozen ground. Within moments, the powerful Habsburg formation collapsed into chaos. What began as a march of intimidation had become a trap. This was the Battle of Morgarten, a battle that changed the balance of power in the Alps and helped shape the foundation of Switzerland itself. To understand Morgarten, you first have to understand the struggle that led to it. Because this battle was not simply about armies, it was about one question: who controls the land and who refuses to surrender it? In the early 1300s, what we now call Switzerland did not exist as a unified country. Instead, the region was made up of isolated mountain communities surrounded by forests, lakes, and dangerous alpine passes. Three of those communities stood at the center of this story: Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden. At first glance, these valleys looked unimportant. There were few cities, few castles, little visible wealth. But appearances were deceptive, because these valleys controlled routes through the Alps, trade caravans passed through them, armies crossed their roads, merchants carried silver, grain, weapons, and supplies through their mountain passes. Control the roads. And you controlled trade between northern and southern Europe for generations. The mountain communities had governed themselves. They chose local judges, managed their own tolls, protected their own roads, and most importantly, they answered directly to the Holy Roman Emperor rather than local nobles. This gave them unusual independence, and nearby powers did not like that. Most dangerous among them was the House of Habsburg, a rising dynasty with growing influence across Central Europe. The Habsburgs controlled large territories in what is now Austria and surrounding regions. They were wealthy, politically connected, and militarily respected. To the Habsburgs, the independent mountain valleys represented a problem. These communities existed inside Habsburg influence, but outside Habsburg control. And from the Habsburg perspective, that situation could not continue forever. At first, pressure came slowly. Officials were sent into the valleys, local court decisions were challenged, land disputes were questioned, taxes and toll rights became points of conflict. Each individual action appeared small, even legal, but together, they slowly chipped away at local independence. To the Habsburgs, this was administration. To the mountain communities, it felt like occupation. Tension grew year after year. Then came the dispute that changed everything. A conflict involving the powerful Abbey of Einsiedeln escalated into a larger political crisis. On the surface, it looked like a disagreement over land and legal rights. In reality, it was about authority. Who had the right to rule the mountain valleys? The communities themselves, or the Habsburg dynasty? The Habsburgs used the dispute as justification for military action. The mountain communities were declared rebellious, disobedient, a threat to order, and with that, war became acceptable. The man chosen to restore Habsburg authority was Leopold I of Austria. Leopold did not prepare for negotiation. He prepared for intimidation. He assembled an army designed to look unstoppable. Armored knights, mounted cavalry, well-equipped infantry, banners flying above polished armor. The force itself was meant to send a message. Resistance is hopeless. Leopold's strategy was simple: march into the valleys, break resistance quickly, force submission before organized opposition could form. He did not expect a battle. He expected surrender, but the mountain communities understood something Leopold did not. If Habsburg control succeeded, their independence would disappear forever. Their judges would be replaced, their laws rewritten, their valleys absorbed into a larger system controlled from outside the mountains. So they prepared for war. The people of Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden knew they could not defeat armored knights on open ground. They could not match cavalry charge against cavalry charge. But they did not need to, because they knew the mountains. They knew where roads narrowed, where horses slowed, where long marching columns became vulnerable, and they knew exactly where to strike. As the Habsburg army prepared its march, the defenders quietly chose the battlefield near Lake Egeri. Along a narrow mountain route near Morgarten, it was the perfect trap. On one side stood the steep mountain slope, on the other, the lake. The road between them was narrow enough to compress an army into a long, vulnerable column. A force too large to maneuver, too crowded to react quickly, too trapped to escape easily. The defenders prepared carefully. Large rocks were loosened high above the road, heavy logs positioned along the slope. Groups armed with halberds and spears waited behind trees and ridges. Every man was assigned a role, every movement planned. Timing mattered more than numbers. The strategy was brutally simple. Let the Habsburg army enter the narrow pass. Allow the front to move forward, allow the center to compress beneath its own weight, and only when retreat became as dangerous as advancing. Would the ambush begin at dawn? The Habsburg army started its march. Several thousand men moved through the Alpine roads, knights at the front, infantry behind them, supply wagons trailing far to the rear. The column stretched across the mountain route like a moving river of steel. From Leopold's perspective, everything looked under control. The banners flew proudly, armor reflected the morning light. The sound of hooves and metal echoed through the valley. This was not an army trying to hide. It was an army displaying power openly. But high above the road, the defenders were already watching, silent, patient, waiting for the exact moment. Late in the morning, the Habsburg army reached the narrowest section of the route. The road tightened between the mountainside and the lake. The knights could move only one or two across. Behind them, the infantry compressed tightly together. The entire army slowed. Still, no enemy appeared, and that convinced Leopold the road was safe. Then the attack began. Without warning, massive rocks crashed down from the slope above. One smashed directly into the lead horses. Another exploded through the infantry column behind them. Men screamed, horses collapsed. The front of the column stopped instantly, but the soldiers behind continued pushing forward, unaware of what had happened ahead. Within seconds, the army compressed violently against itself. Then came the second wave. Heavy logs thundered down the mountainside. They slammed into shields, crushed men, sent horses rearing into panic. Armor collided against armor. The narrow road became blocked by bodies, horses, and shattered equipment. And then the defenders descended, not as a wild mob, but in organized groups. Their targets were precise. They attacked the horses first. Halberds hooked riders from their saddles. Spears struck exposed legs. Knights crashed onto the rocky road where heavy armor became a prison. Once on the ground, many could not rise again. The Habsburg army tried to regroup, but the terrain made organization impossible. There was no room to maneuver, no open ground to form battle lines. Commands disappeared beneath the chaos. The sounds of battle echoed violently between stone and water. At the rear, soldiers still pushed forward. At the front, the road was completely blocked. In the center, Panic spread rapidly. Some men attempted climbing the slopes. They slipped on loose earth and roots. Others stumbled toward the lake. Several fell into the water beneath the weight of their armor, and once they entered the freezing lake, they disappeared almost immediately. Now the fear became uncontrollable. Shields were abandoned, weapons thrown aside. Men fought less to win and more simply to escape. The defenders never lost control. They stayed close to the trapped sections of the road, applying pressure constantly, not chasing glory, not charging recklessly. Their objective was simple: break the march, destroy the formation, force collapse. And that is exactly what happened within only a few hours. The mighty Habsburg force had ceased functioning as an army. It had become scattered groups of terrified survivors struggling to escape the mountains. Eventually, Leopold I of Austria understood the truth. This was no temporary disruption. The campaign had failed. Remaining in the pass would only lead to total destruction, so the order to withdraw was given, but the retreat was just as chaotic as the battle itself. Wounded soldiers stumbled down the roads, broken armor littered the path, dead horses blocked movement. The lake beside Morgarten swallowed men and equipment beneath dark, freezing water. By afternoon, the fighting ended and silence returned to the mountains. The defenders did not pursue far. They had already achieved their goal. The invaders had been driven out. The significance of Morgarten spread quickly across Europe, a force of armored knights defeated by mountain communities. It shocked the medieval world. For generations, heavy cavalry had represented power and dominance on the battlefield. At Morgarten, that belief shattered. The battle proved something revolutionary. Terrain could defeat armor, preparation could defeat prestige, and discipline could defeat intimidation. For the Habsburgs, the campaign was a humiliation. For the mountain communities, it became a defining moment. The alliance between Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden grew stronger after the battle. Their cooperation deepened, their commitment to mutual defense expanded. And over time, that alliance became the foundation of the Swiss Confederation. Today, the mountains around Morgarten are quiet again. The roads remain open. The lake appears peaceful, but the memory of what happened there still matters. Because Morgarten was never just a battle, it was proof that even the most powerful army can fail when it enters terrain controlled by people who refuse to surrender.